Hello and welcome back to the Doane College Recording Studio. Once again, this is Spencer Gregg. Today's tutorial is over the multiple function tools that Pro Tools has to offer. These tools will help your recording, mixing, and editing process go quickly and smoothly. There are many different things that will be talked about, so be sure to pay attention and come back to any parts that you don't understand. Repetition and practice makes perfect. It's okay to watch these multiple times to get all the information. Nothing I say is going to be a waste of time. To preface this tutorial, I need to explain that these functions are fully customizable, but sometimes things get pressed and change the way that you have learned to use Pro Tools. So, if there are any issues with the fluid use of Pro Tools, a certain keystroke may have been done or a button was pressed on accident. It isn't a big deal if this happens, just take a deep breath and use one of these options. 1. Try to put the problem into words and search online for a solution. There are many forums out there for Pro Tools users. 2. Resource back to these tutorials. Your problem may have been covered in one of them. 3. Email the help desk at helpdesk@doane.edu and they can help solve the issue. Okay, let's get started. First, the shortcut to get to both the editing and mixing windows. The shortcut to toggle between these two windows is Command and +- pressed together. This will save you from clicking your mouse back and forth across the screens to switch. On the top of the edit window on your Pro Tools session are your zoom controls, transport bar, MIDI controls, output meter, and synchronization. As you see it here, the synchronization is not selected. The way you select it, if need be, is to right-click on the top and select it so that the check mark is showing. We will go left to right to debunk some of the questions you may have for Pro Tools and its functions. First is the 4 words saying Shuffle, Spot, Slip, and Grid on the left. I recommend always being in grid mode if you are doing a music project. This is the mode which all the tutorials will be completed in. If you are doing a project such as a voiceover, you may want to use another mode, but for now, let's stick to grid. Sometimes with all the shortcuts being used, you may accidentally leave grid mode if you press the wrong thing. The shortcut keystroke to switch between modes is the tilde key, which is placed directly left of the 1 above the keyboard. Next is a very important part of keystrokes. Let's go to the right side of the edit page for a moment and look at the small AZ button. This button should be yellow. If it is gray, press it so it's highlighted yellow. Without this being highlighted, you will not be able to use many of the keyboard functions such as zoom, paste, cut, or copy. We will cover those key commands in tutorial number 6. Okay, now back to the top left. Directly to the right of the modes is the zoom controls, which are all able to be controlled through key commands and the magic mouse as well, but we'll talk about that later. The left and right arrows zoom into a specific spot where your cursor last clicked. The waveform that has vertical arrows increases and decreases the size of the waveform. The button to the right of the waveform does the same thing, but to MIDI lines. The numbers 1 through 5 below this, if clicked, increase and decrease the zoom of the wavelengths. Zoom is helpful if you're trying to find a certain point in the project or see the size of a wavelength to match up something in the project. If you need to, stop the tutorial now and try it for yourself. Next to the right, I want to talk about the Smart tool, which encompasses the trim, selector, and grabber tools. As you can see, you can select each individually, or select all 3 together. If you select all 3, you can use your mouse for all 3 functions. Let's go to a wavelength and see what each does. The trim tool brings up a bracket, showing you that you can increase and decrease the length of the wave. The selector tool lets you click on any grid line to work on that selected area. The grabber tool brings up a hand icon showing that you can grab the waveform and move it to a different location. By selecting the Smart tool, you can encompass all 3. All you need to do is move the mouse across the wavelength to see the different tool indicators change. The Smart tool also adds the Fade tool, which looks like a slanted line when you hover above or below the ends of a waveform. This tool allows proper fading for clips of sound. You should use this for each time a clip ends. If there are multiple clips, you can use the Crossfade tool, which looks like 2 crossing lines when you hover across 2 clips touching each other. By using the Fade and Crossfade, you will eliminate the chance of hearing ticks and pops in your sound when the clip ends. That sound is called clipping. No matter how much you try to get the sound out of a mix later, it's still there, so make sure you do it right the first time. Make sure the Smart tool is highlighted blue, otherwise you may be confused as to why the functions are not working properly. I have struggled with this too much and realized that most of the time, if there's a problem, it's a user error. So make sure you check for these things if something goes wrong. Some other things that should always be highlighted blue are mirrored MIDI editing, automation follows edit, and link timeline and edit selection. You can figure out the name of each button by hovering over it for a moment and letting the name pop up. I have found that having all of these highlighted makes Pro Tools work the easiest and best for the user. This button combination allows you to press play wherever your cursor is and playback will begin there, instead of having the project start at the beginning regardless where your cursor or timeline selection point is. Next to the right is the main counter. There is not much vital need to understanding all of this at the moment. Just know that this will show the seconds and beats of where the project is currently playing at all times. Next to the right is the grid indicator. You will see an image of a note, whether it is a whole, half, quarter, eighth, 16th, or 32nd note. If you click the different notes, you will see the grid lines change and become smaller and more accurate to the beats. This is important to change if you are trying to line up your words and instrumental. You can count out where the words and beats match and line them up. There is a shortcut to this that will be explained in Tutorial 6. We've already talked about the next right section in a previous tutorial. This is called the transport bar. This holds the stop, play, and record buttons, as well as fast forward and rewind. Remember, if you right-click the red record button, you can change the type of recording method used. I prefer Quick Punch, but all of them have different settings that are all beneficial in specific situations. Next are the MIDI controls, which hold the tempo and metering for a song. For instance, you can see that the tempo on a fresh session is 120 with a 4/4 meter. Here you can click the count off or count on to give a specific number of beats introduction before recording. For instance, if your project is in 4/4, it will give you 4 beats before the recording begins. Personally, I don't recommend you use this function, so leave it as saying count off for now. Below the tempo and meter are 4 more options, 2 of which should be highlighted. The metronome and conductor track should stay highlighted. This way, when you set up a metronome, you can hear its beat. Metronomes help you stay on the beat if you are recording, so the audio stays on the grid lines, making it easier for others to play along to a real recording and for your mixing process to stay lined up. Overall, it just makes the process a lot easier if you use a metronome. One other small thing is on the audio track itself. The output does not need to be changed in order to hear out of the headphones or the main speakers. The output should always be on main out stereo. Then the volumes can be changed from your main speakers to the headphones through the PreSonus hardware found to your left on the mains and phones knobs. Also remember that if you are recording, you should have the main speakers turned all the way down and only use headphones. Otherwise, you will have sound from your instrumental bleed into the vocal track. If that happens, you'll have trouble editing later on in the process. This may all seem very overwhelming at the moment, but make sure if you don't understand something to go back and watch again and follow through with a personal project to understand the differences each button does to the workflow of the project. I know it's a lot, but everything is extremely important to know in order to make your workflow faster and your skills at the software and production better. Remember that if you have any questions, to try one of the 3 things said earlier in this tutorial. The help desk can always try to help fix the problem you're faced with. In conclusion, if you have any questions, be sure to look through this video and rewatch to reconfirm your knowledge, or ask the help desk through email at helpdesk@doane.edu. Thank you again for watching. Once again, this is Spencer Gregg, and I'll see you at the next video tutorial.